All right, and more of the same with this lesson, all right? So we're going to continue factoring, all right? The only difference now is that we're going to add in one additional step, and you can see that from the title of our lesson here, more factoring with GCFs, right? So what we're going to add today is this additional step that before I start getting into my factor pattern, what I want to do is always check and try to factor out a GCF if possible. All right, so it just adds one little step at the beginning, but then the idea is that then hopefully that makes our combinations that we're looking for with our A times C and adding to B, all right, to be fewer because we'll have smaller numbers to work with. So to get you thinking about that, all right, go ahead and do our warm up here. So go ahead and factor part A and part B. All right, just once again, all right, doing our normal things. There are no GCFs in these two, so I'll give you that hint right away so you can jump into your factor pattern. So factor those, flip the video back on, and let's see how you did. All right, so, all right, here is my work, and what you can see is that, once again, when we do A times C, I get negative 24. So I need two things that multiply to be negative 24 that add to be positive 2x. You can see that I use 6 and negative 4. All right, so there's 6x, there's negative 4x. My GCF in the first column is x. My GCF in the second column is 6. GCF in the first row is x. GCF in the second row, notice it's going to be negative 4 since they're both negative. And that means our factored form is x minus 4 times x plus 6. All right, looking at part B here. All right, so once again, we do A times C. So 9 times 2 is 18. And I had to find two things that multiply to be 18, but add to be negative 19. All right, so you can see that that would be negative 8 times negative 1. All right, so negative 18 plus negative 1x is negative 19x, or 19x. Left the x off there, so let me add that on. All right, and then I just drop those in. GCF in the first column here is x. GCF in the second column is definitely a 2, right? When I go to the first column, my GCF is 9x, and then in my second column, my GCF is definitely 1. Now this, once again, is like where we have to kind of look at our signs to make sure everything is right. So notice 9x times x is 9x squared, but I need this to be a negative 18, so then that would mean that this needs to be a negative 2. Same thing here, right? 9x times x, that's a positive 9x squared, but then I need the negative 1 times x to be a negative 1x squared. So that's why I want this to be a negative. And then finally, the negative times the negative gives me the positive 2 there. So just remember to go back and, all right, double check those signs. All right, so now let's take a look at our whole class practice here. All right, looking at problems, all right, number 1 there. Now, once again, when we're looking for that GCF, right, we want to start with the smallest coefficient, wherever that may be, all right, because that's going to really lead us through, all right, okay, the numbers, yeah, we want to look for a GCF. So when I look at 8, I have 1 times 8, and I have 2 times 4. And once again, we always want to start with the highest factor, all right, because we want that biggest number to factor out, all right, if we can. So when I look at 8, 8 definitely goes into 8. 8 goes in 24, but 8 does not go into 26. So now I'm going to go to my next highest factor, which is 4. We know that goes into 8. We know it goes into 24, but once again, 4 does not go into 26. Now, all three numbers here are even, so that means that 2 will go into that. So now that means that 2, all right, is our GCF. So let's factor out that 2. All right, so now if I factor out a 2, that's going to leave me 4x squared minus 13x minus 12. All right, and so you can see now, all right, this is going to make our A times C much smaller because now I'm going to do 4 times 12 or negative 12 instead of 8 times negative 24. So by factoring out that GCF, it's going to make things a lot easier to work with. So when I think about my factored form too, I'm going to go ahead and write my 2 here because I have to keep that out front. So any GCF you factor out, we want that final answer as well. All right, so now 4x squared is my new A term. Negative 12 is my new C term, so I'm going to put those into the box just like we've been doing for the last couple lessons. Now, once again, all right, I'm going to do A times C, so I'm going to do 4 times negative 12. All right, and that gives me negative 48. So I have to find two things that multiply to be negative 48, but then add to be my B term. Oh, well, my new B term here, all right, is negative 13x. So I have to find two things that multiply, all right, to negative 14 and then add to be negative 13. Okay, so when I start going through my factors of 48 here, all right, so, and I know one has to be positive, I want to know it has to be negative, right, to get to negative 48. So 1 times 48, all right, and I know I'm going to have to subtract them if they're opposite signs, even though I'm not writing it. I'm just going to make the 1 negative here, just to make everything easy. So that's 47, and then I can do negative 2 times 24, and if I add those together, that's 22. Then I do negative 3, all right, times 16. All right, now that gives me positive 13 when I add those together. So that what that means is I really want 3 times negative 16. That's negative 48, and then 3 plus negative 16 is negative 13. So you just want to just kind of work through your multiplication tables, right? And if you don't know those, you can just use a calculator to start kind of going through there. Oh, and I wrote them backwards here. So we want the 16 to be negative. Let me flip that real quick, just like that. All right, and then I'm going to drop that negative 16x in here. I'm going to drop the 3x in here. And then once again, now we're back to GCF, right? So when I look at my first column, all right, it's just going to be 1x. When I look at my second column, both items are negative, so I'm going to take that negative out. And I'm going to look at 12. All right, so I have 1 times 12, all right, 2 times 6, 4 times 3. All right, and so the biggest number that goes into 16 and 12 is 4. When I look in my first row here, all right, the biggest number that goes into 4 and 16 is 4, and they both have 1x in common. All right, the biggest number that goes into 3 and 12 is 3, and they don't have an x in common, so then that would be my factored form. So this would just be x minus 4 times 4x, all right, plus 3. All right, and then just once again, whatever that GCF is, right, we want to drop that down, all right, and use that. Okay, so now looking at problem 2 here. Looking at problem 2. So once again, all right, we're looking for that GCF, so I'm going to start with my smallest coefficient, all right, which also happens to be the a term again this time. Okay, so that was for our last problem. All right, so I'm going to look at 54, right? And so we have 1 times 54. We have 2 times 27. We have 3 times something. So let me just double check here. I don't think 54 is divisible by, oh, it is 3 times 18. All right, I was a little bit unsure there. I don't know if 4 goes in though. So you can see that, you know, if you're unsure, just grab a calculator. Okay, so 4 doesn't work, 5 doesn't work. I know 6 works, so I do 6 times 9. All right, 7 and 8 don't go into it. So there's my factors. All right, so now I just work from the highest to the lowest. So 54 does not go into 60 and 96. All right, 27 does not go into 60 or 96. 18, let's see, let's see, 60 divided by 18 does not work there. Okay. All right, 9 does not go into 60. All right, and then I think 6 does, because 6 goes into 54, 6 goes into 60, and let's just double check 96 here. 96 divided by 6 is 16. So there's our GCF. We're going to want 6 here. All right, so that's the winner. All right, so 6, if I factor out a 6 out of 54, that's going to be 9x squared. Negative 10 divided by 6 is negative 10x, and then negative 96 divided by 6 is going to give us negative 16. All right, so there we go. All right, so now our new a term is 9x squared. Our new c term is negative 16. All right, so when I do 9 times negative 16 now, I get negative 144. And then I have to find two things that multiply to be negative 144. All right, oh, sorry, once again, yeah, go to that new b term here, but that add to be negative 10x. Okay, and so once again, since this is negative 144, all right, and we know we're going to add and get a negative number, we know the larger factor should be negative, and I probably should have just done that when we went through our last set of numbers here. All right, so now, once again, let's just go through, all right, how do I get to 144, right? So I can do 1 times negative 144. If I add that, that's negative 143. Definitely not good enough. So 2 times 70, negative 72. All right, add those, I get negative 70. All right, 3 times, I think it's 28. So let's see, 144 divided by 3 is 48. Okay, so negative 48, that gets me to negative 45. So let's see about 4. 144 divided by 4 is 36. So 4 times negative 36, and that's still negative 32. Now, so you can see that, right, these are still pretty far away from adding to get negative 10. So sometimes when that happens, you can just jump a little bit. And so I'm going to maybe jump to like 6 and see what happens there. Let's do 6 times. All right, so when I look at 6 into 144, 24. All right, that's negative 24, and that's negative 18. Okay, 7 does not go into 144. Let's try 8, and that's 8 times negative 8. And there we go. 8 times negative 8 is negative 10. So that's what we want. So 8 times negative 8, 8x, and negative 8x is negative 10x. And so you can see the good news is that, right, it may take a little bit of time, but you can get there. Right, and so really you could have, knowing that I needed to get to negative 10, when you saw these first couple, you may have jumped down to like 6 or 8, right? So the smaller this number is, the closer to the middle of your factors you're going to be, all right, versus the end, all right, right here, okay? So you're going to get to those smaller factors, all right, like that. Okay, and I shouldn't say smaller factor, but factors that are closer to each other, All right, so for example, like when we think about 42, 1 times 42 versus 6 times 7. All right, so when we get to those smaller numbers or combinations, we're going to look in there. All right, so now let's drop 8x in here, and let's drop in negative 18x here. So when I look at this first column, all right, the biggest number that goes into 9 and 18 is 9. All right, they both have 1x in common. The biggest number that goes into 8 and 16, all right, is in fact 8. All right, so we're going to leave it like that. Then when I look right to left, or left to right in this first row here, the biggest number that goes into 9 and 8 is 1. And so now they have 1x in common, so it's just 1x. When I look at my second column, or it means my second row, both are negative, so I'm going to take that out. Now, the biggest number that goes into 18 and 16 would just be 2, and they don't have any x's in common. All right, so now when I write in factor form, remember we got to come up here and grab this GCF, which was 6, and then 9x plus 8 times x minus 2. And that's what we have. All right, let's see if we can get through one more problem here. Let's see if we can get through problem 3. All right, so now once again, we're looking for our smallest coefficient to look for our GCF, and this time it is, all right, 12 again. All right, so then when I think about 12, I've got 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. All right, so when I start at 12, 12 works here, but 12 doesn't go into 27. When I start with 6, all right, 6 goes into 12, 6 goes into 36, but 6 doesn't go into 27. All right, 4 doesn't go into 12, or goes into 12 and 36, but doesn't go into 27. And then I get to 3. So 3 definitely works for all 3 of those. All right, so let's factor out a 3. And that leaves us 9x squared plus 12x plus 4. All right, so now our new a term is 9x squared. Our new c term is 4. So if we do a times c, so 9 times 4 is 36. So I've got to find two things that multiply to 36, but add to our new b term, all right, which is 12x. All right, so once again, we start looking, all right, through the things that multiply to 36, and this is positive, so we know both factors have to be positive. So now when I think about 36, all right, so 1 times 36, I add those, that's 37. 2 times 18, add those, that's 20. 3 times 12, all right, that is 15, so we're getting closer, right? 4 times 9, that's 13, all right, really close. 5 doesn't go to 36, and then we do 6 times 6, and there it is, right? Okay, so 6 times 6 is 36, and then 6x plus 6x is 12x. All right, so let's drop those two in. So 6x and 6x. All right, looking at our first column here, the biggest number that goes into 9 and 6 is 3, and they both share 1x. When I look at my second column, the biggest number that goes into 4 and 6 is 2. They don't share any x's. When I look, all right, here, all right, same thing. I have a 9 and 6 again. That's going to be a 3, and they both share 1x. And then 6x and 4 again, we know that they share a 2. So now if I write this in factored form, all right, I take the 3 down, and then I have 3x plus 2 times 3x plus 2. And there you go. So you can see it's really a lot of the same stuff that we've been doing, right? Now we just want to take this additional step here, all right, and factor out that GCF. So once again, if you have any questions, anything that doesn't make sense, make sure you note those and ask those questions in class. See you then.